All right. We are following the, continually, I don't even want to call it breaking story, but the continuing story of the Thousand Oaks shooting out in California now 2 nights ago, not last night, but the night before, of course. A horrible, horrible shooting. 13 people dead altogether, including the shooter, so 12 victims. And then the shooter turned the gun on himself. And, of course, overnight or yesterday afternoon, I guess, some of the names of the victims were released. All were mostly young people in their 20s, lives cut too short, just students out, having a fun night of line dancing at a country bar, country, music night at a bar, and just the tragedy, seeing the parents of these kids just breaking down. It's devastating. And there is, once again, nothing being done. There's nothing being done by this country about guns. And even the shooter apparently thought that that was the bigger problem than the shootings themselves. He allegedly made a Facebook post, and I say allegedly because every place I'm reading, they keep saying the Facebook post believed to be from the mass murderer at Thousand Oaks said this in his post: "I hope people call me insane." He followed that with the crying, laughing emojis and said, "Wouldn't it just be a big ball of irony?" I'm continuing to read, quote, "Yeah, I'm insane, but the only thing you people do after these shootings is hopes and prayers or keep you in my thoughts every time and wonder why these keep happening." Now, allegedly, again, the shooter posted that on social media just before he went to that bar in California and murdered all of those innocent people. It is a trend. It is what we keep doing. People get shot, they die. We say thoughts and prayers. One side says, let's talk about gun control. The other side says, too soon. And hopes we'll just forget about it until the next one happens. This time, and this is how horrible this is, one of the young men killed in the shooting in Thousand Oaks was at the shooting in Las Vegas. He was there and survived. And then he didn't survive this one. His name was Tel Orfanos, and his mother, Susan Orfanos, spoke about it.
My name is Susan Orfanos. My son was Tel Orfanos. We lost him last night at the borderline shooting. My son was in Las Vegas with a lot of his friends, and he came home. He didn't come home last night, and I don't want prayers. I don't want thoughts. I want gun control, and I hope to God nobody else sends me any more prayers. I want gun control. No more guns.
I mean, she said it better than I could ever say it. And, I don't think we should be planning the next candlelight vigil. It's ridiculous. And it's so misguided that we can't even have a conversation about guns. We hear every time one of these shootings happens, we hear the investigators talking about this search for the motive. Why did he do it? What was the motive? And I'll tell you what, in my mind, there's only one or two scenarios where that really matters. That is the scenario of terrorism. If the motive is that you are part of a terrorist group and there are others involved, then yes, we need to understand that. And those, that needs to be rooted out, and whoever else was involved needs to be, needs to be found and brought to justice. If there were any accomplices in any way, even if it's not terrorism per se, if there's some group involved in some way, if there's hate speech involved, those things need to be determined, sure. But after that, we need to be focused on what these things have in common, not what, whether or not somebody, I don't know, just was crazy, not crazy. Like, yeah, I guess that matters in terms of having the conversation. But for example, in Las Vegas, we never really got what the motive was. How will you know when the person has died? How will you know? All you can do is sort of try to guess from the posts, from conversations other people had, from looking back after the fact. And what does that really buy us when you're not willing to talk about a solution, even in all of those cases? You look at Vegas, you look at the shooting in Thousand Oaks, you look at the shooting in Pittsburgh, and that man lived, and we know his motive. He hated Jews. Great. Now what are we going to do about it? As far as I can see, nada. Bupkis. That's what we're going to do. A whole lot of nothing. There is literally, at least as far as I could tell, one piece of active legislation at the federal level having to do with guns. Now, I'm not an expert in sorting through all of the active legislation, but I tried yesterday, and I only found one piece of active legislation, and it was about giving people more guns. It was a law to allow those that are licensed to conceal carry in one state to conceal carry across the border into a second state if that state also has conceal carry laws. That's the only piece of active legislation I saw. There's nothing else. How can we keep letting this happen? And we have to be able to have a conversation that doesn't include, you just want to take my Second Amendment rights away. Like, we need to strip away the discussion of the Second Amendment and the discussion of the Constitution and the discussion of what our forefathers wanted. And we need to sit down at a table and hold that. We can bring that back into the conversation later. But I think we need to start with defining the problem. What is the problem we're having today? And let's put everything out there. We have people that are disturbed in some way. We have, nasty rhetoric in social media. We have, people highlighting violence. I mean, put anything else you want on the table, video games, whatever you want to talk about that might be contributing here. Let's leave the Second Amendment out of the conversation, just at first, and discuss what are the contributing factors. The guns themselves, the access to these weapons, the access to these things that make the weapons work faster and shoot more bullets, whether it's the bump stocks or the extended magazines or whether it's the AR type assault rifles or whatever it is. But let's discuss all of that, because you can't really address the problem until you admit you have one. And we haven't even gotten to step one of the 12-step process, acknowledging that we have a problem. So let's acknowledge that we have a problem, then start discussing what has caused it. Then let's figure out how to fix it. And then last but not least, you can bring in the Second Amendment and see how it applies and where it needs to be protected. That should be the icing on the cake, not the first argument. It's time. It's past time. It's more than time. It's overtime. And this should not be a partisan issue. This should not be an issue. It has literally nothing to do with fiscal conservatism. Why do those two things have to be married? If I'm a fiscal conservative, if I'm someone who doesn't want the government spending a ton of money on programs or building up a giant deficit, I'm allowed to want gun control. Why do those two things have to be married? And how did Christian conservatism get married to we like lots of guns? How did those two start dating and get married? I'm confused by that. Since when do you have to be a gun lover in order to be a Christian? Why are those two things together? You are allowed to have different views on different subjects. You don't have to have only one view. You don't. And I know you don't have only one view. So instead of listening to me talk and saying, oh, you're a libtard and you're a demon rat and you're an idiot and whatever else, let's honestly look at the problem of our friends and neighbors and sisters and brothers and uncles and cousins and babies dying and try to fix it. We literally have a government right this minute that is about to put new laws into place to protect our youngsters from vaping. But we're not willing to protect them from bullets. Where's the logic? I would far rather have my poor baby have a little bit of an addiction to a cigarette than to be dead at the hand of a gun. If I had to choose. But we're going to put that law in place to protect ourselves from getting those kids in those e-cigarettes together. Don't let that happen. It's really dangerous. Let's make sure they're protected. Because, they could die in 30 years. 50 years, they could have a problem. Come on. Okay. Listen, I would love to have an honest conversation with anybody who is into guns and figure out together how we can make this work. Bring your gun-loving self to the table and let's have an honest conversation. I'm super willing to do it. 404-367-9478. But don't you talk to me about the Second Amendment. Bring me suggestions about how we can save our kids and our grandparents. I mean, our grandparents, they killed senior citizens in a synagogue for no reason. Okay. All right. I'm going to breathe.